Up next, so to round off the global trends track, before we go into our new frontiers track, we have a lovely panel that is going to talk about the Digital Markets Act. So now with that, I would like to welcome Jari-Pekka, Shalom, Gil, and Alvaro, who are going to be discussing just that.
Thank you for coming today to hear a little bit about Digital Markets Act. That might sound really, really boring, but will have quite a bit of impact on the mobile games industry, or at least we hope so. So I'm Jari-Pekka Kaleva, Managing Director of the European Games Developer Federation. We represent 24 trade associations from 22 different European countries. And access to talent, access to funding, and access to a route to the top of the value chain are the three things each GDF focuses on. And on the side of the access to a route on the top of the value chain for game developers, we have been working for 8 years now to open mobile distribution channels for the third-party application stores and payment service providers and other service providers. In March 2025, we will hear final words from the Commission on how in line Apple's and Google's implementation plans actually are. It's quite clear that they are not in line in the wording of the DMA and things will still change. However, already now we can see that things are changing. So let's have a short round of introduction of the people who in our panel, who are people who are, instead of just talking about change, they are really being the change they want to see in the mobile games markets. And let's start from Jill. You are running an alternative in-game store. Could you tell a little bit about your store and what you are doing?
Yeah, nice to see everyone. It's always hard to do the panel after lunch, so we're going to storm through this. I'm Gil, I'm a CMO at Appcharge. We do direct-to-consumer platforms, so we help publishers like Huge Games, Product Madness, Uploving, and others sell directly to their players by building web stores and then accepting payments globally. So kind of like Shopify for mobile games.
Great. Alvaro, you are running an alternative application store. So could you tell a little bit more about what you are doing?
Of course. So welcome all to the event and to this panel. My name is Alvaro Pinto. I'm one of the co-founders of Aptoide. Aptoide is an app store that distributes apps on Android since 2011, so more than 10 years now. And recently we also launched our store for iOS. On top of that, we are really focused more on games than in apps nowadays. And on top of that, we have a platform called Catapult that allows developers to do one single integration and distribute across multiple channels, multiple stores. So they can distribute not only on Aptoide, but also on other stores from OEMs, for example, Xiaomi, Oppo, and others, and other stores globally. So this is quite convenient for them because it makes things much straightforward in terms of managing the distribution.
And then let's move to Shalom. You said that you are running an app growth platform. Could you tell us what that means in practice?
Sure. So I'm Shalom Michaeli, managing the entire alternative app stores and the distribution platform for us for DT. Digital Turbine is an app growth platform. We help app developers to run user acquisition with our carrier partners. We work with the carriers in the US and many other places, and they integrate applications as a pre-installs business. In addition to that, we help app developers to monetize them with several products that we have on the monetization side, exchange, offer wall, mediation. And lastly, around a year and a half ago, we have launched our alternative store, the DMA, and part of the discussions around how we can get more value to our economies by integrating a store on a pre-install operation basis and running it with the carriers globally. We launched it a year and a half ago, and happy to elaborate about that.
Great. So let's start our panel on the short-run approach. So until March 2025, things are a little bit unclear on what is allowed, what is not allowed in the digital mobile markets at the moment. So Apple and Google are trying to block in many ways the use of these new alternative stores and payment systems and UA channels that are allowed by the DMA. But at the same time, the service providers like you are trying to overcome those obstacles. So, Shalom, one of the less discussed topics is the impact of a DMA on the advertisement and UA markets. So, how is DMA going to change those market areas, and how are you overcoming any obstacles Apple and Google are setting in front of you?
Sure. So, in order to speak about how UA changes things with the DMA, let's think about how the ecosystem grew on Google and iOS. Around, decade and a half ago, you had basically applications that resulted with organic growth, right? You had the first early Angry Birds back then. You had the mini clip 8-ball pool games. You had Subway Surfers. Those applications generated relatively organic growth. But the industry didn't grow up organically only. The industry grew up mainly around paid media, paid user acquisition. But how do you do paid user acquisition for alternative distribution, for alternative APKs? And what is it even, alternative APK, custom APK? Custom APK is an application that doesn't have Google billing inside. But if you don't have Google billing inside, then you are not able to be in Google Store. So if you're not in Google Store, how do you do distribution, right? And that was a challenge in the past, actually a decade. And I'm happy to say that there are technologies today that actually solve this challenge. If you are installed on the operating system of a device, then there are technologies today that override installing permissions. And instead of running very challenge and hurdle of a download, because you run this, you're about to download an application, custom APK, and then you have a scare screen. Are you sure you want to download this application? Maybe you, us here in the industry, we can say yes because we understand what's happening, but my dad will say it and will say, he'll probably turn off the phone because he doesn't know what to do. We need to create a seamless, smoother, easier, frictionless operation. And for that, we have technologies like SingleTap that enable you to download those applications. And that is enabled to have in tier 1 countries at scale. And the user acquisition can happen programmatically and non-programmatically in the same way it happened with Google and iOS. So those technologies exist, and this is part of how we can actually drive growth for user acquisition for custom APK, and this is what the DMA is actually changing.
So the change is happening. Jill, if there is someone now in audience that is planning to start running their own in-app payments through their own in-game store, so what are the actual things that Apple and Google allow you to do, and what are the things they do not allow you to do at the moment?
So that answer varies, depends on region. So maybe we can focus on the EU, for example. It's one of the most advanced things regions on things you can do. So sticking to that, earlier this year, Apple released new terms in response to the DMA. Those terms require an opt-in, like a developer has to choose to adopt these terms, and they include an install fee, so 50 cents per year per user for any install above 1 million. If you opt into those terms, again, earlier this year, Apple introduced new terms that allow you to include link outs in your app and charge people elsewhere. The topic of APKs and alternative app stores and side loading and versions of your app that have third-party payment providers is not exactly covered fully, but link outs and stuff like that, there are terms that dictate what you need to pay. And if you include link outs in your app, it's different if you opted into the new terms or not opted into the new terms. If you have, it's 2 fees that sum up to 15% of whatever their user is making for the first year after you send them out through a link out. And if you're staying in the old standard terms, it's 25%. So technically, there are terms. Technically, it is regulated, but the conditions are, so 25% is borderline the 30% you're paying now. So the conditions are so laconic, so not favorable, that only a handful of developers even considered adopting them. So that's where we stand today. It's technically regulated, but so unfavorably that in fact the DMA is looking into, the EU is looking into, is Apple actually compliant to the DMA by offering so unfavorable terms?
And that's also one of the reasons why EGDF is now fighting on the commission level against Apple's terms. And luckily, the commission has opened an investigation to see if this new fee structure is fair for the developers. So hopefully by March 2025, things will change. But I think the main thing is that the new third-party payments service providers are in the markets. This route is now building up and it's existing, so it's not something theoretical anymore. Alvaro, if you are planning to distribute your game through an alternative mobile store like Aptoide, how Apple and Google are trying to stop you, and what are the things that you can do in these stores at the moment?
Well, you can do a lot, but looking into what we have in place with DMA, well, actually, if you read DMA and you read the website, the official website of the Commission, it's like a dream in terms of opening the market and allowing everybody to distribute freely, not only through alternative stores, but also directly. And so this is what is stated in the DMA, but of course then there's the interpretation of it being done by Google and Apple. And what we see is that much of the constraints that were in place before, and we've been fighting for an open market since 2014. It was the first complaint we did with the Commission against Google. We are fighting for this for a long time. What we see in the market today and what was implemented by Google and Apple is still very limited. On Google's side, we didn't see much improvements. On Apple, of course, they opened up for the market and they allowed new stores. But as was already mentioned by Gil, by Shalom, there's a lot of constraints on the advertising. So how to promote and push for user acquisition, there's a lot of constraints. I won't mention the details, but it's really difficult to do this outside of Google and Apple platforms. It's about friction in the install time. It's for a user to install an alternative store, for example, and to install then a game from that alternative store, it's a pain. And especially, not only because there's too many steps, and if you use Google's or Apple's platform, it's like a couple of clicks and it's done. There's a lot of friction, but there's a lot of messaging that induces fear among users. For example, like this can be harmful for your device, etc. So people are afraid of installing, even if it's a well-known third-party store. So this friction is also a big problem. And the third one, for example, on Apple's case, is the fees, because the fees are applicable not only to the developer, and if you compare, as Gil was saying, for example, if you compare the old terms and the new terms, many developers and top developers, if they just move to the new terms, they are paying more to Apple, even if they are having the same or less service. And this doesn't make sense at all. It goes against the spirit of the DMA. But also on the app stores. For example, if we launched our iOS store, and it's in soft launch, we are not opening to the world, because if we open, we don't know how many users we'll have, and if this scales, which is good for us, we have to pay Apple. This doesn't make sense. So there are several examples: friction, the fees, the installation and the acquisition. There are several examples like this. There are others that we've been fighting for, but these are probably the most key ones and the most important ones.
Yeah, I tried to install Epic mobile store a few days ago, and I got lost in the process. That's like it's very, very interesting user path that for sure hasn't been optimized for the smooth experience.
Yeah, anyone interested in the space here in the EU that has like an EU iOS account, try to install the Epic Game Store. Epic released a bunch of videos that like explain how to do it. Don't watch them. Try yourself first. Then watch them and see how easy it is, but it's like it's hidden in plain sight, the toggles you have to toggle on, and that teaches you like the length of which the platform will go to try to obfuscate and just like hide those steps.
Unluckily, the Commission is fighting that at the moment, and let's see where they'll land. Do you have any comments at this point on any other points discussed? If not, let's move to the second part of our discussion. So yeah, there are problems in the table. The Commission is fighting Apple and Google, EGDF and other trade associations are pushing the Commission to go further with their enforcement. And hopefully, in March 2025, Apple and Google's terms will change to be more favorable for third-party distribution channels and payment services and so on. So, and that will change many things. So, Alvaro, how do you think the markets will change thanks to alternative distribution channels? Will European mobile game markets become equally fragmented as Chinese mobile games markets are now in the number of different stores? Will we see a wave of niche stores? Will there be new cross-platform distribution channels, or will the publisher stores come back, or will something completely different happen?
Well, I think the beauty of having this open market is that the sky is the limit. Actually, we can, all of them, all of these solutions, we can have alternative stores that can be niche stores. Of course, they can be more tailor-made for a specific geography, and we see some app stores emerging like this, but it can also be direct-to-consumer approaches from developers. So I think this opens a lot of possibilities, and actually we've been constrained by these options of distributing in these two channels. So I think developers can, if we solve the friction problem, if we solve the fees problem, developers can start to use, for example, platforms like ours, which allow you to distribute across multiple channels in one single integration. Because, of course, there's this pain for the developer to, okay, now I need to handle multiple channels. It's a challenge. On the other end, I'm not dependent on one single, and if they stop me distributing, I'm done. And this happened with several developers along the years. So to have multiple channels for them, it's good. It's, of course, you need to pay attention and manage this, but there's space in the market for platforms such as ours that allow you to distribute and manage all these channels at one single console. So direct distribution, alternative stores, definitely. And so this, at least these two is something that will happen if we solve these problems we're still facing with Apple and Google.
So let's take one step further. Shalom, one of the big promises of the Digital Markets Act is enabling side loading on web games on mobile environment, basically meaning that you would be, instead of this kind of playable ads, you would be able to actually directly download the game on your device, or even start directly playing the web game from an ad. Do you think this dream can become a reality one day?
I think that this dream is not a reality. It's not going to happen in reality. It's happening right now. And I can, relate. I didn't want to share about Epic back then when we spoke about a few minutes ago, but I can share in regards to this question that we're doing this with Epic. Epic launched their game store around a month ago, and they recognized the value of having Ignite on device. And actually, we measured it, and we have it in different slides that we share with clients. You know how many clicks does it take you to download a custom APK from a mobile web environment? Just anyone knows how many clicks does it take to download a custom APK?
There's a hand raised there.
How many clicks? One guess. No, not you. So guys, it takes 27 clicks.
27?
27, we counted. Clicks to download a custom APK from mobile web that is not an invite, and that is custom APK just from mobile web. And it's a friction that nobody will do it, like small percentage of users, but that's not how we create an economy, that's not how we create adoption. With Ignite and with the permissions that we have on the carriers level, we decreased it to 2 clicks. With 2 clicks, you can download the APK from a mobile web environment. You can download it from cross-promotion. You can download it in different ways, but you have to have, of course, distribution of the carriers. So I don't think it's a future. Future will be a huge mass adoption of it, but that's already happening right now, and that's within the educational stages that we need to explain how and what. It's very technical. And when you connect that to a developer's needs to continue growth, and you connect that to the carrier's needs, hey, we want to be part of this ecosystem because, hey, we enable it, but we don't see any revenues out of it, then it comes into this kind of win-win situation, and we definitely see it right now. And I think that the future will be a bigger and higher and much more greater adoption, not only in US, but especially here in Europe.
Indeed. So future is happening now, and it's definitely happening on mobile in this side, so the browser games might be coming back. Jill, one of the key areas also that many of the developers are struggling at the moment, especially after all the restrictions Apple has set on actually reaching the players, is building this kind of relationship with your players and maintaining it and keeping them in your loop. And before, Apple and Google used to facilitate that. Now the relationship is getting much trickier. So what kind of new opportunities do you see on that side?
So we've been working with clients for the past 2 years in building their web stores, the direct-to-consumer strategies, and it started, the main driver was margin. But as they started working on this, a nice side benefit that they saw that maybe even it's even bigger and more meaningful to their longevity and future that they saw from actively developing a direct-to-consumer strategy is that they started fostering direct player communications and relationships. So think newsletters, Discord servers, WhatsApp group, Messenger group. All of a sudden, they started being able to communicate directly to their players. It started with innovation, necessity drives innovation, right? So if I have 100 million players on iOS, but Apple says that I cannot send them one sort of message, which is like a link to my store. So if I can't use push notifications, and I can't use in-game, in-app like Messenger, inbox, Apple says I can't, and I can't contact them. I'll ask you the question, are they even my players? They installed my app, but are they really my players if the platform says I can't speak to them directly? And it's what we call bowered relationships, and that's where the industry started from 2-3 years ago. And more publishers and developers have started understanding the great importance of having these direct communication channels. And no matter what regulations will lead us to, no matter how the pieces will fall as they may, we know for sure that any developer who's not currently working and investing on creating community and creating social and creating direct communication channels, they're probably late to the party. They should start. So because no matter what the regulation will land on, no matter how they decide to do strategies in direct-to-consumer, they will for sure benefit from at least having a way to communicate directly to their players. Could be social media, could be community management, communications, chat groups, and there's a bunch of strategies that work and work well, but just developers need to do something. It's super important and critical, and it's even going to be even more important in a couple of coming years.
Do you have any further comments on this topic you want to mention?
I can double click on that and say that developers, speaking with developers, they came and said, yeah, we tried alternative stores in the past and everything. And developers have this kind of feeling that it didn't work for them because up until now it was generating a very small percentage from the revenues. But what you tried in the past decade, is not the reality, and the circumstances today are completely different. And that comes and says, if you tried it in a specific OEM, then you were always blocked or restricted to this OEM operating manufacturer. And today you have technologies that enable you to go cross OEMs. You have technology that enable you to create faster adoption. And there was no better opportunity in the past to be part of the alternative ecosystem like today. I think that we could come and say that we have learned as an industry what we need to do, and definitely the DMA and regulations around the world are changing the way developers in each and every country will have to work and relate, because those opportunities will enable them finally grow the revenues to where they were thinking will happen in the past 10 years, but it wasn't the right time. Sometimes it's timing in life, and this is the right timing for alternative.
Alvaro, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just complementing what Shalom is saying is that we strongly believe that we need also the help of developers. Developers need to embrace these new opportunities. And as he was saying, there was some eventually bad experience in the past because it was really difficult to distribute outside Google and Apple's platforms. But nowadays, it's opening up and there's exciting opportunities ahead. So we also need the commitment of developers. If they want to have the freedom of choice in the future, being able to pick the stores they like, the channels they like, their own channels, they need to start investing. It's not only about the industry on the other side, on the distribution side, that needs to do this effort to push for DMA, to make sure that we have alternatives that are valid and that are competitive with the biggest platforms.
So yeah, on the medium run, after in 2025, get prepared for your distribution channels, to relationship with the players and in-game payment systems to change. But what should be the next steps immediately now? Like as mentioned, there is a disruption going on in the industry at the moment because of the DMA. And regardless of the outcomes, as Jill mentioned, things will be continually changing. And of course, this in the beginning we discussed all the obstacles, and we now know all the opportunities that are there. So, Jill, when would you recommend introducing a third-party in-game store, and what are the situations for a game developer when you wouldn't recommend doing it in the current situation? So there are obstacles, there are opportunities, so what you would recommend doing?
From our point of view, we work with very upmarket, very top-tier grossing studios, so platform relations is an issue there. There's like two forces that you need to balance. One is like you need to endure, right? If your profit margins eroded to the point that you have to do layoffs and your business is at risk, you have to explore D2C in some element and aspect. And on the other end, you cannot cut the branch that you're sitting on. You cannot bite the hand that feeds you. And you have to balance the two. So the more sizable the studio is, or as a studio, if you're very reliant on platform distribution, so if you're often featured, if you're often getting like a big amount of organic installs from the platforms, all those algorithms that promote you and choose that you are going to be featured are somewhat related to your sale volume, to your in-game IAP. So chunking away from that and migrating some of that revenue to a third-party store or a web store or an APK, there's some things you need to balance. So you need to maintain good relationships with the platform you sit on. In contrast to that, if you're realistically not getting that much distribution from the platform, then maybe you are ready to be more lenient with, or more aggressive with how you'll build those alternative app stores, alternative distributions, APK, web stores, and you'll be more aggressive in promoting them to your players because there's less of a risk of something to lose. So it's two forces that you need to balance. It really depends on your category. It really depends on how reliant you are on organic discovery, distribution, and organic installs from the platform.
So to sum it up, yeah, if you are doing well, there's different considerations than if you are this kind of challenger in the market, and then there is new entrepreneurial opportunities for the brave entrepreneurs to explore in the current situation.
Yeah, and I would say there's no just do or don't. There's no two edges to the axis. There's a bunch of things you can do with a very intermediary or very first steps. So like Alvaro said and Shalom, these are great guys to talk to. These are great things to explore. And have an early version, have a closed test group. There are things to try out in certain regions, in certain test markets. There are first steps you can take without going all in, just going super aggressive. This industry is changing. This change is happening. It's probably a good idea to explore different solutions. Like we offer an in-game payment SDK you can explore. There are things you can start to see what fits your tech stack. So once regulation catches up, you'll be in a better position to decide what is right for you to take on and what is not.
Absolutely. So be ready. Alvaro, both alternative mobile distribution channels and also this kind of aggregators specialized on distributing games through these alternative stores are now emerging. But for what kind of games should you be making to really explore the opportunities Aptoide, Epic Mobile Store, or upcoming Microsoft Mobile Store are offering to you? So for who the new distribution channels are the perfect match?
Sure. I think this alternative distribution benefits everybody, all developers, in different ways, of course. This gives developers flexibility, first of all, and there were some examples already here of, okay, you can do things or you can explore new things that you were unable to do with Google and Apple and the current distribution, because they are more strict, and okay, so you have this flexibility. Try a different campaign, try a different business model. This is possible, and talking with these partners in the alternative stores, alternative distribution, this is always possible. Then you have, okay, reach more users, and that's what all developers want, reach more users and a bigger audience for their games, but also make more money, of course, in the end of the day. So in terms of audience, I think even for small developers, there's an opportunity there, and indie developers, because the current stores are so crowded that it's really difficult to stand out. But if you have a niche store or you have channels that are not so crowded with titles, there's more space for you to breathe and to stand out. So I think this is an opportunity even for small developers. For the top ones, I believe it's two things, of course: acquiring new users that they weren't able to reach with the standard channels, but also to improve their monetization per user. Because, for example, if they are doing direct-to-consumer, they can get a much higher cut than the cut they get currently with the stores, with the standard, 70-30. But, or they can get a little better with some of the stores that are offering, for example, 80% to or 75% to the developers. So in terms of monetization, I also see an angle there, and we have several examples of top developers that are willing and are doing this engagement with alternative distribution, because in the end of the day, they get more users, but they also get more money per user than in the standard channels.
Yeah, and what we are also seeing at the moment is, of course, mobile developers going to PC side at the moment, but also the PC side having a look on the mobile again, because before it was, well, borderline impossible to actually make a success there, but now with the new distribution channels, things might change. So, Shalom, what are the immediate next steps you should take on the user acquisition advertisement side after the things are now changing in regards to player communities and so on the DMA, after the DMA is entering into force?
So in general, developers in a tricky situation right now. Many developers are a little bit struggling, right? Where CPIs are increasing due to consolidation, privacy issues, our pool per user is decreasing. There's a gap over there. How do you bridge this gap? Few things that you can do. One is establish proper goals. Okay, what do you want to achieve in the next several quarters with alternative distribution? You have, the way I see it, you have 3 columns. For example, let's take PC out. You have a column of iOS, you have a column of Google Play, and you have a column of alternative. Right? Your goal is to increase this column because you want to diversify, reduce risks. So you want to increase the column of alternative APKs, alternative stores, quarter after quarter. After you defined and you understood what you need to do, because you have to act quickly. Number 2, act fast. The biggest app developers are already within the alternative stores, period. They're already there. That means that they get the learning curve. I think that Gil touched about it. You have a learning curve. How do you integrate? With who you integrate? How do you run it? How do you run UA? The way that this ecosystem, this industry knows how to run user acquisition on Google and Google Play is completely different from alternative APKs. What does it mean in regards to your LTV? Your LTV is increasing by 10%. What does it mean from your economy? Are you decreasing your IAP price by 10% to give a cheaper cost IAP purchase for a user, or are you keeping it in your pocket? There are different strategies, and developers know it best. So move fast, quickly. And the third one, embed always user acquisition strategy. Putting your application in the store, or I call it vomiting in the store, is the one thing. That's great. You have it in the store. Amazing. But that's only partial. You need to continue growing via also user acquisition, because that's how you can actually create the scale and how you can increase the third column, which is the alternative APK. That's the next steps that I would recommend.
Thank you so much for all the panelists on their insights. So we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Are there anyone? Well, there's Sui. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you for a really interesting panel. I would like to ask, let's say that we will have alternative distribution channels, and maybe there is a store which is not so known, and how do you ensure the user, the player, that the content which they are downloading there is not harmful, containing any viruses or anything like that?
Alvaro, would you like to start?
Sure. Security is always a concern, and making sure that, okay, we get the right apps and we don't have anything that harms the user devices. This is something that, look, you build trust with time, and we cannot assume that there's only 1 or 2 platforms that make sure that we are all safe. Actually, we are not. And last week there was an example on Google Play of an app being distributed to millions of devices with issues. So we need diversity there. And for example, we were working since day 1 on the security of our platform, and we've developed software to make sure that the content is safe. And we have several mechanisms. And actually, we asked a third party to evaluate what we had, and the output was really good, because we were comparable with other platforms, such as the ones from Apple and Google. So it's something that needs to be in place. You cannot always have 100% sure that this works, but you can for sure go for platforms that bring you trust, that have some time and experience in the market. That counts also. Of course, we will see emerging a lot of newcomers, and that's good for the market, but you need to look into it and see if, and validate if it's credible. No one will assure you this by 100%, but it's something that needs to be there since day one in the app stores, because app store is not only shelves to distribute content, it's much more complex than that, and security is one of the big issues for someone that is launching an alternative distribution channel.
Shalom and Jill, do you have anything short comments to add?
Sure. I think that we've been a little bit brainwashed in the industry, by saying that in order for you to download an application, you have to go through a store. And as Alvaro said, there are many issues also with the stores. There are spywares. It's not necessarily clean. There are issues as well over there. I think that there are different aspects that can create a safe environment as well. Nothing will be 100%, and I don't think that we need to think that something will be 100%. But there are also additional components of checks within DT, and I know what we do. We have one sort of QA that we do, and then we send it to the carriers, and then the carriers does another second of QA round. So you have 2 rounds of QA in order to create an environment that is clean, safe, and that the users can use. But this notion that it's only with Google and Apple, I think that this is something that we need to start refuting with the time, because as we see, it's not clear as well. It's a self-serving for those platforms, and we have to be a little bit more agile, because there are solutions out there that can be not less decent as others.
Yeah, one short thing that I'll add is that there's this model from Christensen of diffusion of innovation. It's tried and tested. Early adopters and innovators will be them, early majority, late majority, and laggards at the end. Users will be what they are, and then innovators and early adopters will flag themselves as being more willing to take on risks and chance. And just to reference to the previous talk that we had on this stage, if you, at least for the first couple of months into this trend, if you need to target the people who are willing to take on the risk. You don't need to try to convince the laggards, this is safe. They're not going to be convinced. They're going to be convinced when 10 of their friends do it. So, and there are vast majority, not majorities, but vast percentages of the market that will be willing to explore other alternative app stores, especially if they're really connected and engaged with your game. That's the next level of engagement. That's the ones you need to find, and that's the ones you need to offer this to.
Thank you so much. I think we are running out of time now, so let's have a round of applause for the great panelists, and let's.